Let's do this. Ready to dive deep into atomic habits?
Always ready to talk habits.
Well, we've got a ton to unpack from James Clear's book, and, our listeners are ready to take notes.
Absolutely. They're here for those light bulb moments, those why didn't I think of that gems.
Totally. And for me, one of the biggest takeaways was how tiny changes, like 1% improvement each day, can snowball into huge results over time.
The power of compounding. It's mind-blowing, isn't it? 1% better every day for a year, you end up 37 times better.
37 times. That's wild. So those small wins really do add up, huh?
Oh, absolutely. It's like that analogy Clear uses. Imagine flying a plane from London to New York, right?
Okay, I'm picturing it.
A tiny course correction at takeoff could land you in Florida instead.
Whoa, so even the slightest adjustment can make a huge difference down the line.
Exactly. It's about the power of consistency. Small tweaks, consistently applied, lead to massive shifts. And it's not just about flying planes. Think about your daily habits.
Okay, yeah, I see the connection. So swapping that afternoon cookie for an apple, that's like adjusting the plane's course.
You got it. Small change, big impact over time. And it applies to every area of life, whether it's health, learning a new skill, or even managing finances. Consistent small choices equal big results. Just like James Clear's own story.
Oh, right. I read about his high school baseball injury. It sounded brutal. Broken bones, vision problems, the whole 9 yards.
It was rough. But his comeback story is a perfect example of how tiny gains lead to monumental victories.
I'm dying to know how he turned things around.
He didn't focus on the massive goal of full recovery. Instead, he zeroed in on the smallest wins, literally relearning to walk in a straight line.
Wow, starting from scratch like that.
Exactly. Each tiny step built on the last, and those little gains, they compounded until eventually, academic All-American.
From barely walking to an all-star. That's incredible. Talk about walking the walk, literally. Okay, so we get the atomic part, those small changes. But how do we actually make those changes stick? I always thought it was all about setting big, ambitious goals.
It's funny you say that because James Clear actually argues that we should focus on systems, not goals.
Wait, hold on. Isn't goal setting like rule number 1 for achieving anything? How could we just ditch goals altogether?
Goals give you a target, sure. But Clear's point is, if happiness is always about the next achievement, you're never really content in the present moment.
So it's about enjoying the journey, not just fixating on the destination, right?
Yeah.
But how do systems fit into this?
Think of it this way. Goals are the results you want, right? Systems are the daily actions, the processes that get you there.
Okay, so let's say my goal is to run a marathon. My system would be my training plan. The daily runs, the cross-training, even the rest days.
You nailed it. So instead of obsessing over crossing that finish line, you create a system that makes those daily runs a natural part of your life.
Okay, that makes sense. But how do you actually build a system that really works?
Now that's where things get super interesting. Clear lays out these 4 laws of behavior change almost like a cheat code for building any habit.
Ooh, cheat codes. I'm all ears. Let's unlock these habit hacks.
Law number 1 is all about making the cue obvious. It's about designing your environment to trigger the desired behavior. Want to drink more water? Keep a full glass right on your desk where you can't miss it.
I've actually tried that, and it works wonders. It's like having a hydration reminder staring me in the face. Okay, what's the next law?
Law number 2, make it attractive. Basically, you want to boost that craving for the habit. One way to do that is to reframe your thinking.
Reframe my thinking. How so?
Say you want to exercise more, right? Instead of focusing on how much effort it takes to get started, focus on how awesome you'll feel afterwards.
I love that. Focusing on the reward, not the struggle. Okay, 2 laws down. What's next?
Law number 3 is make it easy. The whole idea here is to reduce friction. Ever heard of the 2-minute rule?
Vaguely. It's something about simplifying things.
Yeah, exactly. You break down a daunting task into its tiniest starting point. So instead of clean the whole house, it's put away just 5 things.
So even on my most exhausted days, I can handle that.
Exactly, and that's the key. Even a tiny step keeps the momentum going.
It's like tricking my brain into getting started. Okay, what about the final law?
The 4th law is make it satisfying. You want to make sure the habit has a payoff, something that feels good, it could be an actual treat, or just that sense of accomplishment.
So the reward reinforces the behavior, making me more likely to repeat it.
Exactly. And when you put all 4 laws together, they create this chain reaction.
It's like a habit formula. Cue, craving, response, reward.
You got it. And this actually leads us to another key concept, the habit loop.
Okay, lay it on me. What's the habit loop all about?
It's this 4-stage cycle. First, a cue triggers a craving. Then, the craving leads to a response, which is the action you take. And finally, you get a reward.
So the reward loops back and reinforces the whole cycle. Fascinating. But how do we even know what our cues are? Or how to make a habit satisfying?
Ah, great questions. And that's where things get even more interesting. You see, our environment plays a huge role in shaping our habits.
Okay, I'm ready to explore that. Let's dive into the power of our surroundings.
Welcome back. Before we jump into how our surroundings can make or break our habits, I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier. The power of our own identity. It's not just about doing the right things, it's about being the right kind of person.
You know, that really stuck with me. This whole idea that to really change my habits, I might need to start by changing how I see myself. It's total mind shift.
It is, and James Clear makes a really compelling case for it. He says we tend to act in ways that align with our self-image. So someone who sees themselves as a night owl.
Probably not going to be thrilled about that 6 a.m. yoga class.
Exactly. Their actions are just reflecting their self-perception. But here's the cool part. We can actually use this to our advantage.
Wait, so by changing our habits, we can actually change how we see ourselves.
You got it. It's like each time you do that new desired behavior, you're casting a vote for that new identity. So, want to be a writer? Sit down and write, even just for a few minutes each day.
I write, therefore I am a writer.
Exactly. You're proving it to yourself with every action. But it's not just mindless repetition. It's about being mindful of the identity you're reinforcing with each choice. So let's say you want to be a more focused person, but you keep getting sucked into social media. What message is that sending?
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm kind of showing myself that distractions are more important to me than focus. The opposite of what I want.
Exactly. It highlights why being deliberate with our choices throughout the day is so important. Every small decision is a vote for the type of person you want to be.
So I'm shaping my identity one choice at a time. Whoa. It's a little daunting, but also kind of exciting. But let's be real. Even with the best intentions, sticking to new habits is hard. I mean, there are going to be days when I slip up, right?
Of course. James Clear is very realistic about that. Setbacks are part of the process. The trick is not letting one slip up derail the whole train.
Okay, so let's say I cave and order pizza instead of making that healthy salad I planned on. How do I stop that from spiraling into a week of bad choices?
Well, first, remember that our environment plays a big role. If you're surrounded by temptation.
It's way harder to resist. It's like we talked about before, setting ourselves up for success.
Exactly. If I'm trying to eat healthier, having chips and cookies on the counter is basically sabotage.
It's like setting up an obstacle course to get to the fruit basket.
Exactly. And on the flip side, making those cues for good habits super obvious can be a huge help. Want to work out more consistently? Lay out your workout clothes the night before.
Visual reminder. It's like an invitation to get moving. Speaking of making things easier, what about that 2-minute rule?
Love that rule. Instead of saying, I'm going to meditate for 30 minutes today, you say, I'm going to sit and breathe deeply for just 2 minutes.
Because even on my busiest day, 2 minutes is doable.
Exactly. It's about building that momentum one tiny chunk at a time.
Love it. But sometimes, even starting small, I need a little extra push.
I hear that. That's where habit tracking can be really helpful.
Ah, yes, habit tracking. I've dabbled in that. Sometimes I use a calendar to mark off my workouts.
It's so satisfying to see those check marks add up, isn't it?
It is. It makes me feel accountable. Like I'm making progress.
Exactly. It's visual proof of your commitment. Whether you use a fancy app or just a simple notebook, the key is finding what works for you.
So true. But what if I need that extra push from, another human? Is there a way to bring other people into this habit journey?
There is. James Clear talks about the power of accountability, whether that's with a partner, a friend, or even using a habit contract.
Okay, I'm picturing a legally binding document signing my life away to good habits.
It can be more casual than that. It's basically about making a public commitment to your goal, and maybe even adding a little consequence if you don't follow through. Imagine saying to your friends, I'm running a 5K in 3 months, and if I don't, I'm donating $100 to a charity I hate.
Ooh, now that's some serious motivation.
Yeah.
It's like double the accountability, my competitive spirit, and my values are on the line.
Exactly. James Clear shares a great example of an entrepreneur who used a habit contract with his wife and his trainer to help him lose weight. By putting his money where his mouth was, he seriously boosted his chances of success.
Wow. That's pretty brilliant. Okay, so we've got tracking and accountability partners. I'm feeling pumped to tackle these habits. But with so many good habits out there, how do I even know which one to start with?
That is a great question, and James Clear addresses that head on. He suggests that one of the best things you can do is look at your natural abilities and interests.
So if I love being outdoors and I hate the gym, maybe hiking is a better fit for me than treadmill workouts.
You got it. It shouldn't feel like a chore. The habit should feel aligned with who you are. And there's another key element, the Goldilocks rule.
Wait, the Goldilocks rule. Like the three bears and the porridge, how does that apply to habits?
Think about it. Goldilocks wanted everything just right. For a habit to stick, it has to be the right level of challenge. Too easy, we get bored. Too hard, we get frustrated and give up.
So it's about finding that sweet spot, challenging enough to keep me engaged, but not so hard that it's overwhelming. But how do you actually find that sweet spot?
James Clear recommends aiming for a challenge that's about 4% beyond your current ability. Think of it like leveling up in a video game. Each new level should be a little tougher, but not so tough that you rage quit.
Love that analogy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so find a habit I enjoy, make sure it's challenging enough. This is making habit building feel way more strategic.
It is, but there's one more piece of the puzzle, and that's figuring out how to deal with those inevitable slip-ups, how to stay motivated when things get tough.
Okay, that's what I need to hear. Let's talk about staying on track even when I don't feel like it. Okay, we've covered so much ground already. Tiny gains, the power of our environment, even the Goldilocks rule. But before we wrap things up, I've got to ask, how do we actually stay motivated? Because let's be real, even with the best system, there are going to be days when I just don't feel like it.
Oh, absolutely. Motivation comes and goes. That's just part of being human. But James Clear had some really insightful strategies for dealing with those slumps and staying committed for the long haul.
Lay it on me. What are the secrets to staying on track?
Well, remember how we talked about the importance of systems?
Yes, systems over goals.
Right. When we rely only on willpower, we're setting ourselves up for a struggle. But when we have a system in place, it's like having this built-in support, even when motivation dips.
It's like that gym bag packed and ready by the door.
Mm-hmm.
Even when I'm not feeling super pumped, I'm more likely to grab it and go.
Exactly. And another helpful strategy is to shift your focus. Instead of getting fixated on the outcome, focus on the process.
So instead of stressing about losing 20 pounds, I should celebrate each healthy meal I make, each workout I complete.
Yes. Find those small victories along the way.
It's like giving myself a mini high five with every good choice. I like that.
It keeps the momentum going. You start to build this positive feedback loop.
Where those small wins fuel even more motivation. I could see how that works.
And it brings me to one final thought that really struck me. James Clear talks about becoming addicted to the process of improvement.
Addicted to improvement. That sounds kind of counterintuitive. Isn't addiction usually, a bad thing?
It is. But think about it this way. When we experience the benefits of building good habits, we start to feel healthier, more energized, more confident.
Those good feelings become the reward.
Exactly. And we crave those feelings. So we naturally want to repeat the behaviors that got us there. And James Clear makes a really interesting point. He says the most successful people aren't necessarily driven by external rewards, like money or fame.
So what drives them?
It's that intrinsic desire to grow, to learn, to become better. They're addicted to the process of self-improvement.
I love that. It's like they've tapped into this internal source of motivation.
And it becomes self-perpetuating. The more we improve, the more we want to improve. It's this never-ending journey of growth and discovery.
Wow. This has been such an incredible deep dive. I feel like I have this whole new toolkit for building better habits. And honestly, I'm feeling super inspired to actually put all this into action.
That's awesome. And remember, even the longest journey begins with a single step. Pick one small habit you want to work on and get started.
Small changes, big results. I'm going to keep reminding myself of that. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into atomic habits, everyone. We hope you've learned some valuable strategies for unlocking the power of habits. And remember, you have the power to create the life you want, one small habit at a time. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep striving to become the best version of yourselves.